Hi, welcome to the Forecasting for Success podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brie. I'm a doctor of psychology, financial educator, astrologer, and founder of Forecasting for Success, a community of people improving their financial literacy to achieve financial independence. I blend my expertise as a former professor and financial intelligence analyst with the tool of astrology to help break down why you are struggling with specific money habits and the best way to form more intentional responses and choices when it comes to money, especially to help you feel more secure in your financial decisions and improve your money skills for building long-term wealth. Welcome back to the Forecasting for Success podcast. I'm so happy that you're here. Remember, you can subscribe to the show to ensure that you never miss an episode or any of the free resources mentioned during my conversations with guests, which you can find in the show notes of each episode. You can also share this show with a friend, which I'd really appreciate, as well as send me your comments and questions that I can help answer in the future episodes. You can reach me at forecastingforsuccess.com/podcast. My guest today is Carlene, who has questions about how to balance how she is investing her money and resources into herself for day-to-day well-being, as well as her business for long-term success. Carlene asked to remain private for this reading, but she did do a lot of head nodding throughout her sessions and did enjoy talking through her questions, plus having new ideas to implement afterwards to help her. It was an honor having her trust and being able to read for her. And she was very patient with me since I was struggling with my annual dry winter cough at the time that we recorded this episode. I've been blessed to live in southern Germany since 2017, but my lungs still miss the very humid East Coast air of the US where I grew up. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So, hello and welcome, Carlene. Thank you so much for being here. What would you like a reading about today?
Thank you so much for having me, Brie. I'm so grateful for your insights to look at this. So as far as my money questions, I have taken a really long time to grow, to actually invest in the things I need to not only exist, but also nourish my soul. And then now I feel like I've swung to that opposite side of the spectrum where I've didn't spend anything, had a hard time spending $20 a week on groceries for myself, to, okay, now I invested thousands of dollars in this coaching that I know that I need, and also I don't have this money right now. How do I handle that bridge and come back? And then on the flip side, trying to go back out and offer my services for what feels to be a really good, fair, kind, generous exchange to represent the kind of person that I want to be. And more specifically, only having a tiny, in comparison, amount of work to offer that I feel is ready to be going out there. And some I'm just creating now. So it's this push-pull of all these desires of how I want to be honoring myself, how I want to honor others. And I haven't fallen into a good feeling anything yet. I'm in that limbo of not feeling good with money yet.
Right. That's a really good question. And there's definitely a lot going on right now with your chart and with the transits that you're going through that speak to both things, both why are things unclear and also how can you be more tangible and actionable with your finances. So we're definitely going to get deeply into this question and hopefully provide some clarity for you. So we are going to be keeping your birth information private, but what I can say is one of the first things that immediately jumped out to me whenever I looked at your chart is that 6 of your 10 planets are in air signs, and none of your planets are in an earth sign, which is really relevant for your money and resource questions that you have going on, because what this points to is that resources are a management issue, and you'd naturally face a lot of challenges with balancing your resources. So things like your time, your money, your energy, etc. This would be much more challenging for you to balance because you lack any type of like grounding energy. It just all is nebulous. It's all up in the air. And this also points to challenges with being able to follow through on your ideas. So you'd be very likely to have a lot of ideas, a lot of meaningful ideas, but then lack the energy or the know-how in order to accomplish each step, all the baby steps that are needed in order to see things through in a very mundane way and to be able to see things through to the end. Does that feel familiar?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
1000,000,000%.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was going to take a guess that you've probably been trying to outsource what feels unfamiliar whenever it comes to resources, and this outsourcing of the mundane work is what's been ironically eating up the resources and the money that you do have. So I'm assuming that that's been part of the issue as to what's causing your debt is that you lack this ability to connect your ideas to the main mundane world, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, even just today, I was looking very specifically for like, how do I meal plan and how do I create a weekly prep? And that's like one of the last steps that I've taken, just to even try to manage my calendar for me to be able to show up energetically for things that I want, know that I'm not overexpending. I'm not going to be 45 minutes late to something. Like I've taken multiple productivity courses and things like that. So, and even just trying to learn how to sell and things like that. But one of the things I found most helpful has been the AI assistance with helping break things down for me. So I'm not making those decisions. And then I
Right.
can just
Something to show you
follow.
those steps that are missing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So 100%. Oh, that's 1000% spot on.
Yeah, having this air dominant chart is what I'd like you to keep in the back of your mind as we go through your chart more in depth and look deeper into this resource issue, which does show up in other ways as well. So let's just go ahead and start diving in and try to see how we can balance out this energy and find you some relief to mitigate this concern with how to manage resources. So
Okay.
first, what we're going to do is we're going to look at your second house, and this does represent your personal finances and your possessions. So the second house is what shows us how we create solid foundations in our life and more stability in our lives as well. So it's what shows us what we value in the world and our attitudes towards the material world. And your second house is in the sign of Gemini. So Gemini rules your second house. And ironically, what this points to is that you possessing knowledge is what makes you feel safe and gives you a sense of security. But you've likely had experiences where knowledge did not equate to being able to take action to truly keep you and your resources safe, or like when a theory ends up not matching reality. So, have you had that experience before where theory didn't meet reality, where it wasn't equal?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think expectations growing up with how I'm even just supposed to show up as a person
Mhm.
versus how I needed to show up as a person. And then within relationships, trying to follow relationship advice. And yeah, so 100%.
Yeah, what's interesting about your chart is that you have some very unique placements that make the very mundane and routine advice that you would find online not really applicable to the way that you think, to the way that you live in the world, to the way that you experience the world. And so it's not as easy as you just researching something simple, like for you to just pull up a very, like you were saying, meal planning. It's not as easy as just pulling up a meal plan and then just saying, oh, okay, meal plan, and then being able to do it. There's this big disconnect between how you experience the world and your worldview and what works for you, what is sustainable for you. So I definitely understand how that can be very frustrating that you're still not at a point in your life to where you have all these plans that work and have brought relief.
Yeah. Yeah, that really resonates because had to watch like probably 10 different meal prepping people to get their kind of principles to be able to conglomerate that into what I actually ended up with
Right,
to tell
exactly.
GPT. And then, yeah,
Yeah. And again, it goes back to that resource issue because that's eating up your time and your energy. And so it makes sense why you could only get through so much. And then you would have to take a break or even sometimes get frustrated and just try to revisit it again in the future.
yeah,
Gemini ruling your second house, it also points to valuing what resources can help you do rather than valuing the resource itself. So, for example, you're more likely to value communication or intellectual interests, and money would just be something that would get you to those things that are of more value. So, again, when money is not the central goal in this example, it can be more challenging to come up with tangible ways to ensure that you have enough for the other things in your life that are of a higher value. And obviously, there's nothing wrong with that. That money is definitely a construct of our modern time. Like, money is not innate to being human. So, the right answer is not to centralize money. The right answer is to come up with ways to ensure your safety and security so that you can enjoy and experience other things that are of true value to yourself. It also means with Gemini in the second house, it can also mean that your income fluctuates routinely or often, since you're more likely to pursue different interests or try out different types of jobs or different types of things that bring in resources. What's really interesting, though, is that you can channel this type of natural diversity into multiple income streams. So the important thing is to direct your energy into bringing in the diverse money rather than spending money on multiple different things. Does that make sense? It's more about changing this mindset of how it's okay to have multiple avenues of money coming to you rather than attempting to spend your money on a lot of different stuff and just hoping that the universe will bring it back. Hopefully that makes sense.
yeah, I
Because
think I can see that.
yeah, because I assume up until this point you've been trying to put money towards different things, hoping that will be the fix, hoping that will reverse what's been happening, but it's a shift in mindset to think about different ways of putting out your talents and your skills. That way your talents and your skills is what brings the resources in return.
Okay. Yes,
Hopefully
I can see that. Yeah.
hopefully
Giving
that's
rather
clear.
than, yeah,
Exactly.
beautiful.
So some people are able to have one job and that one job brings in the income, or they have one, if they're self-employed, then that means they have one big item and that one big item brings in income. But you have more natural talent in having diverse skills and diverse offers, many different ways, even if it's all of the same theme or very close to one central idea. You have more of a natural talent to where you could diversify that to have several different types of offerings on different, even on different platforms or different via different methods. And then those different methods are what's bringing you the income.
I can I can see a couple different ways that would work.
Perfect.
So,
I think it's important to recognize that one thing that might be challenging about having this diverse income stream is just having the discipline needed to follow through on ensuring each idea is set up with a very solid foundation. That way they can either sustain itself, they can sustain the offers to an audience, or function appropriately as a passive method of bringing in income. So it's important to remember to fully flesh out an idea and to sit with how that would be made tangible and made realistic. And if you are going to end up diversifying different offers, it's important to make sure that you yourself are not stretched too thin. So if you do have multiple things out there, multiple offerings, that many of them would be able to genuinely operate in a passive way. That way you don't become burnt out. I think that's all I wanted to touch upon when it comes to this representation of your personal values when it comes to your second house. What I normally do is I shift to Venus right after that because Venus is the ruler of the second house. But for your particular chart, I'm actually going to shift to your moon next rather than Venus because the moon ended up being a focal point of your chart. So your moon is in Gemini and it's in your first house. And the moon is actually the handle of a bucket chart. So I'm not sure how familiar you might be with all these
Well,
astrology
then,
lingo terms.
yeah, yeah.
But in essence, a bucket chart means that all of the planets are on one side of your chart, except for a singular planet. And that planet represents the handle, if you will, of this bucket. So for your chart, your moon is the handle. And so this means that the moon is it's important to channel the energy of your chart through your moon. And when the moon is the handle of a bucket chart, what this means is it's important to balance out your head and your heart. So due to the placements of your chart, it's likely much easier for you to intellectualize things rather than feeling them because it's either difficult or overwhelming in order to feel the emotions rather than to intellectualize or think about what the emotions should be or could be. So is that something that you've had to struggle with before or try to figure out?
Yeah, I definitely had multiple ways that I didn't know what emotions I was feeling. They would just overcome me very quickly, like with anger. And then there's also like urges that I get that it's really hard for me to sit with. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that I've been working through as well. So it's
Yeah.
definitely a theme.
Yeah, 100%. It's not an easy placement because not only is your moon the focal point of this bucket aspect that we're talking about, it's also one of the points of your T square. And so it's like a double hit, if you will, because it's sitting opposite your Uranus, squared to your sun. And so it's just this repeated theme of head versus heart and not knowing what you're feeling and then over analyzing what you should be feeling. And it just seems like it's this vicious cycle, unfortunately, that would make it very complicated and heavy and energetically heavy to try to sit with it and to sort through it. It would not be easy.
Yeah.
Oh, I actually had a follow-up question for you. I wanted to ask you if you've also struggled with having to change course partway through taking action, or do you see yourself as being good with waiting to see results before pivoting, before making your next decision?
That's hilarious. That's actually like part of what I'm creating right now is like how to change direction. But yeah, it's so true. It's almost like this wall that I hit where if something doesn't feel right in the middle, I stop and then I'm like, I'm done. And I don't go back.
I'm trying to think how to ask this. I'm not sure if that means that that method works out for you, or if that is your natural instinct and you just can't help it that you just follow through with that.
I think it was ultimately like what I found is it was kind of like my guidance system.
Okay.
So it was fine ultimately. And I stopped beating myself up for it at some point. And, that's something that, I've been actually trying to start a business for, since 2018, you know? So it's like
Yeah.
I've had so many things that didn't work. And yeah, so the people who have been with me for a long time, they mention that sometimes, like, I just am you're so brave to keep trying.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. That's what I was seeing in your chart. I was seeing that it's very natural for you to start down a path and then maybe not even get halfway down the path and pivot. And so that's what I kept seeing over and over in your chart is that you have this natural tendency to pivot. And so obviously that's good because if something's not working, you would be much more willing to take action immediately and mitigate the damage of seeing something through when you already know it's not going to work. But the flip side of the coin is that you never quite finish something either. That's the other challenge, is that you have the capacity to see so many different opportunities and so many different ways of doing things that it's a balancing act of knowing intuitively, I need to pivot because what I originally thought isn't working versus being confused and not seeing results or not getting to the end and achieving what you need to achieve.
Yeah, and even if I do finish it and follow through because either, the people weren't able to come through with me all the way, or, whatever story I'm telling myself of whatever, I don't continue repeating it and marketing it. So it's like, it was like this, offer graveyard that I have. And also, touching back to it really was guide rails. I do feel like I've now touched on a very deep part of what my lessons were and to turn those around. So now at least it's giving me a real fortitude to show up and just talk about my experience as I'm going through it and creating it as I go, and just not even making that wrong, that I'm creating the program as I go for myself based on stuff I did in the past. And now I'm just like codifying it. And so I feel like that's been helpful for me because I've been down, like you said, so many other roads. Then now it's like that I found one, right? One of the paths that I'll take of multiple income streams, hopefully, to get me where I want to go. So it'll just be a matter of finding what feels good.
Right.
Yeah.
It can be very challenging to have to market offers online because online marketing is very repetitive. And that would be painful. Since I can see that your mind works so quickly and you're always looking forward into the future and you're looking ahead and you're looking how to change and be dynamic and improve and evolve. And so having to be so repetitive and so simplified, it wouldn't feel good to have to do this for marketing in order to make sure that your products are always reaching the right audience. And so I can see how you might have this amazing offer, but consistently messaging to people that it's out there for people to come find it. I can see how that would be not the most fun thing in the world for you to have to do in order to get people to come and benefit from your skill set.
Yeah. I just started talking more about like a theory, like a global theory that's like more globally applicable rather than specifically my offer at the moment. And I'm realizing that to get that theory into the screens and the minds of enough people for it to kind of make a difference, I will have to keep repeating that message. But it does feel like if it's true or at least not false, then that would be something worth repeating over and over. So that part is nice for me because then it's like it's collective centered. And then the invitation to come in deeper with me would be lesser of a focus
Mhm.
and more desire driven, I hope,
Right.
like true desire. And so that's something that I've found very specifically was letting people express their desires to me about what they wanted with or for or by me has kind of been my go-to because it just otherwise felt like I was pulling teeth or punching someone in the face accidentally. It just was horrible. Everything was very horrible.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's this repetitive online marketing goes against naturally how you think and communicate and just what feels comfortable for you. And so I wanted to ask you if you've ever come up with a checklist. Have you ever come up with some type of I kept coming up with this word checklist in order to fill in this mundaneness that isn't natural. It's not something obviously that is enjoyable for you. That way you can more or less copy paste what's missing and try to stabilize this gap that you have. Is that something that you've used before?
I made a checklist for like the collective theory that I'm talking about. And that's been nice because then I can just check it off. But I haven't done that yet for my own program.
Okay. I was going to recommend that this be one of your homework items, if you will, is coming up with checklists for whenever you have gaps, whenever something, again, feels mundane, feels very repetitive, is more of a chore, if you will, whenever it comes to your business and its offerings. That way you get through these mundane tasks that are really important for consistency whenever it comes to having secure income and financial safety. So let me try to expand on that and what I mean. Because as we were mentioning before, you have a very natural tendency to pivot. And so it's very possible that you've been spending time trying to think up of new, inventive, very creative ways of how to do things like messaging or make offers to potential clients, etc. And there's no magic wand, there's no shortcut. I think that's what I'm trying to say. There's no shortcut, unfortunately, that you can think up or invent or pull from the ether. Unfortunately, it's this mundaneness that's the missing piece. And that's unfortunately what's so cringy, what you're so resistant to. And so if you're able to come up with a to-do list, a checklist of just knowing, okay, here's an actionable list. Let me just quickly do the things that are on the list. And then I can pivot to something that lights up your own soul whenever it comes to experimenting and exploring with your offerings and finding new ways to create things, expand on your offers, improve them, etc. That way you can focus more of your energy and your attent on what you're offering itself, and then quickly get through all the mundane things that are not the so fun part of this type of business.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, it will take a little bit of time in order to research some of these to-do lists online, but it's important to have them and to go to them. And like I said, just get through the nitty-gritty as quickly and as efficiently as you can, because obviously those missing pieces are what bring in your customers. And then once you're through that, then you can spend more of your time and energy on being creative, which is what you are good at.
Yeah. I appreciate that you're saying that because that is, like you said, what I spend a lot of money on is figuring out how to market. So
Mhm.
if I can go back to all those resources and understand what the principles of what they're saying, or even go to new resources, and then I can pull what are the actual action steps that are needed. And then, like you said, yeah, just be able to have that list actionable.
Yeah,
Like that
exactly.
specifically.
Yeah, I really don't feel like you need to spend any more money trying to find this answer, if you will. I really believe between what you've already poured your resources into, slash things that are discoverable online, I really feel like you have the pieces that you need in order to create these tangible lists. And then, unfortunately, completing the tasks, which is the not so fun part. And don't worry about being repetitive because that's unfortunately just what it takes. It's about being direct and clear in your messaging and just repeating it over and over and over. So as long as you show up consistently online, that really is all it takes, if you will. You will find your audience. And then that way, like I said, you can spend more of your creativity and your natural skill set inside of your offerings to naturally evolve and invent over time. Best case scenario is that one day, as you're bringing in more income and you have much more disposable income, you can then outsource the pieces that you dislike. So, for instance, one day when you have this extra income, you could potentially hire like a part-time virtual assistant and then have the virtual assistant be doing the, hey guys, here's my offer. Hey everyone, like here's who I am, or putting reels on Instagram, etc. And so that's what you want to do is be pulling in enough income to where you can outsource the pieces that are the not so fun parts, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Sounds good to me.
Yeah. All right. So let's pivot and talk a little bit more about this T square that you have. Like we mentioned, it's between your moon, Uranus, with the point being the sun. And so a T square in a chart, it represents a lot of natural tension, but it also represents opportunity. And so the first thing that you do when working with a T square is you want to first attempt to release some of this tension or overcome challenges that you face by focusing on your sun. And your sun is actually intercepted in the 11th house in the sign of Pisces. And when you have an intercepted sun, what this means is that this energy that the sun represents is either unexpressed or it's blocked in some ways. Some astrologers even the way that they explain an intercepted sun is it's almost like it's hiding in the 12th house, even though it's not physically there in the 12th house. And so it has a lot of unconscious tension to where some of the tendencies might be unconscious in some ways without it physically being present in that house. What I'm seeing is that this intercepted sun likely caused difficulty in your earlier life, understanding what your true needs and desires are versus someone else's opinion of who you are and what your true needs and desires are. Does that resonate?
1000%. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so a really important aspect of a placement like this is to make a conscious effort of setting feasible goals in order to aim yourself and make your goals achievable. So again, it's another example in your chart of taking your ideas and your energy that's more up here and bringing it down in a very grounded way to the real world, if you will. Oh, I have a note here about Uranus being in opposition to your moon. And we touched on this a little bit earlier with what you were saying, actually, because this aspect represents a natural disruption to your emotions, making it much more challenging to both feel and understand your emotions. It also represents a deep need for personal freedom and the ability to express your emotions in unique ways. And this is where some of your beneficial energy comes from as a source of creativity and innovation, because you naturally have a very unique way of feeling and experiencing the world. The real secret, though, whenever it comes to a T square, is to seek opportunities in the missing piece of the square. So the planets are naturally a triangle, and what you want to do is look towards that missing point. And so for you, your chart, the missing point is the sign of Virgo. So your Virgo is intercepted in your fifth house, and there's no planets there, but it's still important to understand this energy and what it's doing in your fifth house. So your fifth house is ruled by Leo, which is its natural ruler. But with Virgo being intercepted in that house, it again represents this unexpressed or less obvious energy that you have. And the fifth house is what represents our self-expression, our creativity, and also where we find joy in life. And so, what this means for your personal growth is to practice embracing imperfection, even if this imperfection ends up being visible to others, just because being flawed is a part of being human. So, it's about learning that it's okay to make mistakes and to grow from our mistakes, also to experiment with things in life, because these moments are the ones that help us grow as people. Plus, it also provides real, tangible examples of how we can help others too from our lived experience. So, what this is asking you, this missing piece, if you will, it's asking you to find balance between your head and your heart, which again is a pattern that is repeated in your chart in a couple different places. So, it's about finding activities that feed both your brain and your soul. This ability to touch upon practicality and to ground yourself, it's really important for you to be able to live a more holistic lived experience. So, hopefully, that resonates with you, or you might even be doing something different now in your life in order to try to bring out this potential, if you will.
Yeah, I just started talking about an ancient wisdom book study.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but about love.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
That 100% applies.
yeah. Yay. Ah, good.
What I actually would like to do now is pivot to the current transits that you're going through because there were multiple transits that you're going through. So I can see that this is a really active and dynamic period of your life because the it's definitely representing you being called to change, called to evolve as a person. And I can definitely see how having clarity or seeking clarity would be really important because there's so many different things that are pulling on you at this time in your life. Okay. So the big one that I want to get to first is that Pluto currently is sitting on top of your midheaven and it officially crosses over into your 10th house on 4 February. And it's going to hang out here in your 10th house for many years since the planet is the slowest moving planet. And ironically, your natal Venus is also conjunct your midheaven. So your Venus is in the sign of Aquarius at 0 degrees 5 minutes. And this is a major conjunction. This is a really big deal to have the planet of Pluto transiting over not only your midheaven, but to get into your 10th house. Because the 10th house, it represents our careers and our reputations, how we're seen in the world. And so this is a really big deal for you since you're looking for more clarity and opportunity in your career path. With Venus being there also, it represents a major shift in personal values as well. So this is definitely a time where you would be relooking at old values, old boundaries, just old systems, how you view resources and what they can provide to you. Just the whole thing would be under assessment, if you will.
1000%.
So Pluto's going to be hanging out up here and technically conjunct both Venus and Midheaven through January of 2029. So this is helpful in giving you plenty of time to work through and experiment with a career change, if you will, or modifying your personal values, both of which can cause others to see you differently in the world. So I just want to remind you to take your time and remember that nothing has to change overnight. It's really important to pause and take a rest sometimes, especially with all the air that you have in your chart. I definitely can see how that air would want you to move quickly and also have your mind racing a mile a minute. But this transit is a major transit, and it's definitely asking you to slow down, to experiment, to feel it in both your mind and your body of what feels right, and to have a purpose for why something needs to change. This transit also brings up feelings of wanting to use power and money in new or different ways. So it definitely makes perfect sense why you have this new focus on resources and what you can do with those resources, plus what resources can do for you. So just remember to ground yourself into the why before moving forward with something. Try to have a more thorough understanding or even a step-by-step plan when needed of why you're moving in a certain direction so that it's either easier to stay on course or you have more reason to make changes if that's needed, rather than having random pivots or very sudden pivots of wanting to do something different just because it's innovative or exciting or unusual. Your natal Venus being in Aquarius, it definitely points to a need for unconventional freedom and autonomy. So I had a question for you. Have you had a dislike or a distrust of mundane financial advice because it either seems boring or seems like it doesn't apply to your personal situation?
Yeah, I think so because it almost felt, well, I think part of it was like I didn't have to do a lot of investing in my own college, very gratefully. And also, it kind of felt like I had to invest in myself in this way in order to show myself and understand the value of money.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's like some of the conventional like saving money ways or like this is the 5 tips to bringing down your spending. It's like, well, I've already done those things and I still need to buy all these other things. And I want to honor my desires, not necessarily like an addictive urge, but like a deep-rooted like desire and like allowing myself that freedom to do that. Like I don't hear a lot of money talks around that, like with that as a center. Like how do you honor desires and be money aware, values aware, and future aware? How are they all coming together? Because I hope for a big future. There's a point where you have to bet on yourself.
Exactly.
It feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to ask and make sure that you have a way to get out of debt, that you have a type of plan or know where to find that resource if you don't currently have a plan. Just because I can see from your chart that the traditional methods of increasing your income and getting out of debt, it would not resonate. It would not necessarily apply to your personal situation. And so I just wanted to check in with you if you have what you need or if you would need a helpful resource. So, for example, mindful spending. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but for instance, that might be something that's a little more applicable to your life versus some more traditional methods.
Yeah, I've taken a course that actually went through line by line and we looked at positive, negative, emotional, like how it was affecting me when I spent that. So is that kind of like what you're looking at, thinking of?
Yeah, yeah. Just that this isn't a giant question mark, just that you have some type of method or idea of how to action this to, improve your situation.
Not 100%. It almost feels like what I had in mind was kind of saying, hey, like as almost as part of my business model, but then that kind of feels bad where I'm like, hey, I want to be as generous to you as possible. And I have this goal of doing this thing, this goal, and this is like my stretch goal that I need to pay off everything. But
Right.
like for right now, it's just this. And like, people can contribute as much or little as they want within a certain amount. And then if it's under a certain amount, it just doesn't make sense with credit cards. So I'm like,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
pay it forward. Like, tell me like, give me an extra long feedback. Like, tell a friend, like that sort of thing. Like, that's in my head, the plan that I had. And I didn't have much plan else besides, yeah, I didn't have much plan else.
That's okay. That's okay, because that's what this time is about. It's about figuring all this stuff out. So the example that you just gave, it definitely speaks to what's happening with this Pluto transit across your Venus and your midheaven. Because again, one of the major themes of a big transit like that is new boundaries when it comes to your values and your resources. So that's definitely something to think about and to practice is how do you hold boundaries in order to have your needs met and offer something of value to an audience? Because when you're able to hold boundaries to your work and the value of your work, it helps other people respect that value and respect your work and why you have that boundary. And it'll help you have your financial needs met as well as your other needs, like your creativity need, because again, that's a resource that pulls in income for you.
Yeah.
I know that there's complicated layers to this whenever it comes to the value of our work and what we charge other people, etc. Because it's if we're struggling, we also understand it and respect that other people are struggling. So it's really challenging, especially as women, for us to not feel greedy or other types of negative connotations whenever it comes to being paid our worth, because the messaging for us as women is very different. So it's really important to sit with what we might have been taught or what we might think about money and when it comes to being paid our worth and what our work is worth, because it's not negative. You're not taking advantage of anyone for asking your work to be paid its value. Because again, we all know what's reasonable. We understand what a reasonable price is for our work, and it's okay to hold a boundary on that. So that's something that you can try to think through or sit with whenever you explore and experiment with your prices, for instance. And the transition of that question, the reason why I was asking is because you also have a major Saturn transit, and Saturn is all about the work. It's all about the discipline and following through on our word. And so Saturn right now is currently conjunct your natal sun, and it will be for another month. So you've probably been feeling this transit for some time now of, okay, it's time to put in the work. I have to do something different. Because again, it's at the focal point of your T square. So it's definitely asking you to action things, to do things. And so it's not just about putting in the work, it's also about being humble to the process of learning new things about yourself. It's about taming our egos a little bit in order to recognize that there's always a different way we could be doing things, and there might be different reasons for doing things. It's okay to change and evolve. That doesn't mean that we're, what's the word? Inauthentic. It's not inauthentic to change. There's a time and a place when we need to evolve as people, evolve our businesses, etc., and that's okay. So the good news is that it is possible for things to come together in a material way during this time. So as long as you're willing to be present with and put in the work to make stronger foundations in your life, where stronger foundations are needed. So for example, being better with your financial habits, having a more tangible plan of action to keep your finances more consistent and resources working more in your favor. Those are definitely all ways of showing up and doing the work that Saturn's asking you to do. I have a new question for you. I also wanted to know if you've noticed how you approach things as being different, or a change of how you approach things compared to how you've been in the past. Like, has your worldview changed at all recently?
Yeah. When I was putting myself through my program this past week, it really helped me kind of zoom out and look at like the timeline of me like getting shut down as a person and like contracting and then opening back up and finding safe spaces to open and then really putting that unconditional love, like receiving unconditional love from source, higher power type of entity, and really making that my primary focus of receiving because and like functioning because it just that's really what I've been wanting. Like that's every time I'm like, what's the deepest thing here? Oh, it's that. Like, oh, okay. So let me just go ahead and give myself that so then I can actually function and show up and be of service. And I think, yeah, like having all of my actions being towards a betterment of not just my life, but all the people in life around me. And then anyone who trusts me more deeply, with that same sort of service and really decentering myself as like with the fear, because when I feel into my body with that, I can just sit in the fear forever, find another way, a new way that I don't have what I need. I don't have the people that I want in my life with me to be of service, but like I can be of service. Do it, like that's what I want
100%.
for my kids. So it's like, well, okay, then go ahead and you do it.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's incredible how you're speaking your chart right now. And the reason why I asked that question is because you have Uranus sitting on top of your ascendant. And so this is definitely asking you to have new ways of looking at the world, new ways of doing things. And it's also close to squaring your sun. And So your son's in the 11th house, and the 11th house represents community. It represents, groups. And the thing about that is it doesn't have to be external groups. These are also groups that you can create yourself. So it's just incredible for you to be speaking of learning how to be authentic to yourself, but also authentic in helping others. And it's interesting because people with T squares, they often end up being some type of teacher or mentor. That's usually a life path for them, is figuring out how is it that they can serve and help others. So it's just incredible that you're reaching these critical points of living your chart, of discovering your path in life.
That sounds a lot better than all the struggles I've been through.
Yeah, it's a nicer way of saying there's a purpose to the struggle.
Yeah.
It was for a higher purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
so having Uranus right now sitting on top of your ascendant, it's also a really good time to reassess your money habits and to try new things, because a transit like this helps you to cut through anything inauthentic or stifling. So honestly, this year is the perfect time to find new and better ways to manage your resources, as well as redefine your relationship to money. A transit like this, it also helps you to speak your mind and to stand up for what you feel like you need, even if your needs are changing. So it's important to remember that we're dynamic people and we do have different needs in different circumstances. And like I mentioned before, our needs naturally change over time as we grow as people. So a transit like this, it helps you with expressing your needs and being less afraid to stand up for yourself. So it goes back to finding new boundaries and holding firm on those new boundaries that we mentioned earlier. Uranus being in your first house and being on top of your ascendant right now, it really helps you to not only identify the new boundaries, but maintain them as well.
yeah. And I think to your previous points of mundane is almost like the opposite, where it's so charged for me to speak about money and boundaries. But if I start talking about it and making it on my to-do list, then I will probably go to the other end of the spectrum of like, this is not as charged. This is easier. This is,
Exactly.
oh, that feels so good.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Because
Yeah.
it's about pulling the energy down into the real world and just understanding that it's okay. It's just a natural part of us living is figuring out how to have this exchange of goods and services. And it's natural. It's not something, like you said, that has to be charged or scary or untouchable.
Yeah. That just felt like it shifted something in me, like really, really fundamentally.
Oh, that's lovely. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like anything else. You just have to practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's a skill.
That's right.
Ah, it's amazing. Yeah, that's so much
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, please take all the time that you need to sit with that. I'm happy to hear that.
better. Yeah. And I can do hard things. So
Hmm.
yeah. Well,
Absolutely.
yeah, I love it.
Hmm. Another thing I wanted to point out with your Uranus transit is that it's asking you to take time to reinvent yourself. So this is a good time to be a little bit of a rebel and to push the envelope and embrace your freedom to be your authentic self and to try new things in your way, because you're meant to be pushing boundaries during this time and to purposely cause disruption from the routine and from old ways of doing things. So this process is to help you and to free you from old things or old systems that no longer serve a purpose in your life or are no longer serving you, so that you can find newer and more liberated ways of being you at the end of a transit like this. So, this is supposed to be an exciting time that should energize you into knowing breaking up this old stagnant energy. The purpose of that is to find not only a better you, but better systems that serve you too.
I love it.
Oh, yeah. I was going to mention that it's important to not just get lost in the experimenting or the experimentation process. It's important to remember that the point of the experimentation is to come up with realistic steps that need to be actioned. When you recognize that you do want to try something new or to put a new system in place. And the only reason why I mention that is just due to this earth element being missing from your chart. Like I said, it's about remembering to take a breath and take a moment to bring it down and to ground yourself into actionable things that will help you in your day-to-day life. So, for example, if you decide that you want a new habit or a new way of doing something, so we can use money, for example, like following a budget, if you will. It's a good idea to research successful examples of how other people have achieved what you're looking to accomplish. So this can be, think of it as like a nerdy way of touching grass. So once you've identified what you would like to experiment with, then this is a Virgo-like way to ground you and to help you create an actionable bridge between your idea and the steps that are needed to be successful.
Mm-hmm. I can definitely feel that.
I wanted to bring in the theme of your chart of how to use a long-term growth area of your chart, like that missing element of your T-square with a current transit, to try to help bridge these themes that are coming up over and over again in your chart in order for this time to be more productive for you. It can be a confusing but invigorating time with all of these transits that you're going through. And one of the reasons why I was trying to come up with very clear, direct ways of actioning some of these missing steps is because another transit that you're experiencing right now is Neptune square Neptune. And so this is one of those once in a lifetime transits. It's also referred to as one of the midlife crisis transits of having Neptune square your natal Neptune. And unfortunately, Neptune creates really nebulous or convoluted feelings. It can make things a little hazy, a little unclear. And so I was hoping to try to be very direct with actionable steps that you can take and not be, I guess, flighty with the information, because that would not be helpful during this time. So this Neptune square Neptune, you'll be feeling it through April of 2026. And so the point of Neptune square Neptune, it's about dissolving old boundaries because it's time to create new ones. So again, it's another theme of needing these new boundaries in your life. Yeah, it can be a very challenging time because it can represent feeling lost or feeling like things are unclear. It just feels like we're treading water and not really getting to where we want to go. But the good news is that once the fog lifts, if you will, you'll be able to more clearly see how far you've come. Yeah. So this transit is asking you to embrace the unknown and let go of any strong need to control or to keep things the same. So one of the lessons of this transit is to learn to see through illusions or through deceptions, whether these are self-imposed or if they're put up by others. So whenever you're going through a transit like this, it's really important that if you have people that you really trust, even a community that you really trust, it can be very helpful to bounce ideas or questions off of trusted people to help you process things. That caveat of trust is really important during a Neptune square Neptune transit because it's critical to know that the other people or the other person genuinely has your best interests in mind. So it can be a good time to have a mentor or even a therapist. But again, as long as there's someone who genuinely wants to help and would not cause further deception. The last transit I was going to mention is actually one that's going to come up for you in late April through July. And so what's going to happen is that Jupiter is going to enter your second house. So when Jupiter enters your second house, it can actually be a helpful resource to expand financial opportunities to bring in more income. But the important thing is to have a solid foundation before this time period happens. So again, it's going to be late April through late July of this year. And so it's again working with that Saturn transit that you're going through to make sure that your foundations are in place so that when this expansion happens, you're more likely to benefit from it. Because Jupiter is often misunderstood. Some people by default think that it just means luck. But Jupiter doesn't represent luck, it represents expansion. So by putting in the work now, you're much more likely to experience positive opportunities that are the result of your work. So, for instance, the financial foundations that you're creating, it's more likely to bring in money rather than expand the money leaving.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my last note about that upcoming transit is that the current placements that you have, like I said, with Saturn and Pluto, it's definitely pointing towards establishing more grounded systems and processes that are able to withstand change and to withstand being challenged. That way, they provide you with personal protection for the unexpected. So, whenever it comes to money, for example, one of the foundations that are often discussed is the emergency fund. So that way, if your finances are challenged, if you have something very unexpected happen, the emergency fund is usually an example of people having a foundation in place as a type of buffer, as a type of barrier. That way, there is something there to take the fall rather than you personally having the brunt of something unexpected happen. So that's just an example, if you will. So those are all the major findings, all the major things that I saw both in your chart and for the current transits that you're experiencing. But I just wanted to ask you if I've answered your questions or if you have any new questions that have come up for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's made things a lot more clear where just thinking that these are skills that I can develop in order to take care of myself better, and that I'm already doing a lot of these things that is here. So it's amazing. So yeah, just that validation of following my instincts. And even though I didn't know all the transits, and I don't really, yeah, I don't have that like knowledge application yet that I'm doing those things. Yeah, and that actually also helps me because part of what I do is astrologically based, and I have had a really long journey of trusting astrology.
Mhm.
So it's really helpful to get it from a third party to know that they're seeing what they say is there, what I'm feeling is there, and how I would interpret it as well. Like it all drives. And yeah, I think the thing that the main question that came up was the intercepted sun in the 12th, because I've not heard a lot of explanations of the 12th that make my understanding clear. So that would be my main question of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So your intercepted sun, it is in your 11th house. But like I said, because it's intercepted, it can mimic qualities of the 12th house. And so I think that's whenever I had images of the past start coming up, because honestly, whenever you have suppressed or hidden qualities when it comes to something as critical as your identity and your ego, that definitely speaks to hardship from past, usually hardship from childhood. And it definitely speaks to hidden enemies. And that can be very complicated for a sign like Pisces because you have a natural tendency to merge with others. And so it can be very dangerous to have this natural tendency to have blurred lines between where you end and someone else begins, especially if that person does not have your best interests in mind. And so there would have been a natural, almost like a crisis point of having to recognize that someone who should have trusted you, that you should have trusted, and they should have loved you and had your safety in mind, ended up not having your best interest in mind or what they wanted, how they wanted you to live isn't necessarily the proper lived experience for you as an individual. That's up for you to decide. That's not for someone else to decide and have. Your autonomy needs to be respected. So I can definitely see how that would lead to instances of your autonomy not being respected and you having this crisis point of having to unlearn what someone may have been trying to mandate for you or to put on you. And so that can be, it can be complicated also in the way that, like I said, the 11th house represents community. And so if you naturally evolve your identity as it relates to others, again, with the sign of Pisces, that it brings up challenges, natural challenges, because again, where do you end and the group begins, if you will? And again, it's about safety. Which groups are safe and which groups might not be safe?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say those are some of the themes for having a Pisces sun intercepted in the 11th house. Those are some of the main themes that I would assume come from that placement.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's different later in life because later in life, it should be, hopefully, depending upon our personal challenges, it should be easier. You should have more capacity to be your own person. It's a very challenging time, obviously, when you're a child and we don't have a choice. And early adulthood, that's a much more challenging time. As we gain autonomy and life experience, hopefully it's not such a crisis or so scary or such a stark point anymore. Hopefully it's quicker. It's quicker for us to recognize appropriate boundaries and who's safe, who can safely be in our lives.
Yes.
I don't know if that's what you were asking, but that's what came up for me.
Yeah. No, that's helpful to like when you were saying about the hidden enemies and trust, and very helpful to bring back the 12th into the 11th.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
I'm glad I was able to answer your question.
Yeah. I'm writing stuff down.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure having you. I hope that this was helpful and has given you some new ideas to take with you.
Yeah, like I said, like it definitely feels doable now to just start talking about what's real with finances. And that's something I've wanted to do for a really long time. And I feel like can be really empowering in multiple ways. Like just thinking like of opportunities of like people to practice. Oh, well, I think I want to give $5. Okay, well, how did that feel for you? Like was that actually a good thing for you? Do you feel like that's equal? And then the next time they can like make a change if they want. And I actually love that because that's how I learn.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I'm really happy that that's one of your takeaways because you're 100% right that it's definitely something that's doable and it's a skill that is easy to learn. It is possible to learn and implement in new ways. So I'm really happy to hear that that's one of your takeaways.
Yeah.
Because you're right, it's something that should empower you for you to know that you're able to improve and move forward with. So it's
Yeah.
definitely doable.
Feels so good. I'm so excited.
Yay.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely wish you success moving forward. So thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you being here.
Yes, Brie, your wisdom is highly valued and very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank you so much for joining me this week on Forecasting for Success and let you know that you can read the transcript for each podcast episode on my website, which is linked below in the show notes. I've also included the link to send me your money questions if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast at forecastingforsuccess.com/podcast. And if you're ready to get started on improving your financial literacy and developing your own personalized money plan, I encourage you to join my Forecasting for Success community, where I teach you everything you need to know about budgeting, how to choose your retirement number, how to invest in the stock market, and so much more. I go live in the community each month to check in on your progress and help answer any questions you may have. And it's a supportive community where you can also check in with other members and learn from their experiences as well. I hope you take good care of yourself, and I'll talk to you next week.